Captain Ryan Brooks stared at the emergency beacon flashing red on his control screen. The signal came from Research Station Omega-7, a small outpost studying old alien ruins near the edge of known space. He had been running routine patrol missions in this sector for 3 months without seeing anything more dangerous than space pirates. Now, his communication officer was picking up a distress call that made no sense. "Captain, the message is strange," said Lieutenant Kate Miller from her station. "They say everyone evacuated, except one person. Something about a Class Omega event approaching their position." Brooks frowned. Class Omega meant something so dangerous that entire star systems would empty out to avoid it. He had heard stories from other captains about such things, but never seen one himself. Most of the time these events turned out to be false alarms or equipment failures. "How far to the station?" he asked his navigator. 6 hours at full speed." "Sir," replied Ensign Tony Clark. Brooks made his decision quickly. "Set course for Omega-7. Maybe we can help whoever is still there." The USS Endeavour turned toward the research station, its engines humming as they pushed through the darkness between stars. Brooks used the travel time to study the files about Class Omega events. What he read made him uncomfortable. The records spoke of something called the Void Walker, a being that had been moving through the galaxy for thousands of years. Wherever it went, people ran away in terror. Scientists called it Zarathius, though nobody knew if that was really its name. The reports described a creature of immense psychic power that existed partially outside normal space. Most beings who got too close either went insane or died from the mental pressure. The Galactic Council had strict rules about avoiding contact with it. Every species in known space had the same reaction when they detected its presence. "They ran, Captain. We're approaching the station," announced Miller. "I'm detecting one life sign inside. Looks like a human female." Brooks could see the research station through the main view screen. It looked normal from the outside, but all the docking bays were empty, except for one small shuttle. The station should have housed 50 researchers, but only one person remained. "Any sign of the Void Walker?" he asked. "Negative, sir. But there are some strange energy readings about 2 light hours away and getting closer." Brooks ordered his ship to dock with the station. He took a small team with him to find the remaining person. The station corridors were empty and quiet. Personal belongings lay scattered around, as if people had left in a great hurry. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls. They found her in the main research lab. Dr. Lisa Morgan sat motionless at a computer terminal, her eyes staring at ancient symbols on the screen. She did not respond when Brooks called her name. Her hands shook slightly, and her breathing was fast and shallow. "Dr. Morgan," Brooks said gently, touching her shoulder. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "The translation," she whispered. "I had to finish the translation. They all left, but I couldn't leave. The symbols, they tell a story." Brooks looked at the screen. Strange markings covered it, unlike anything he had seen before. "What do they say?" "Not what everyone thinks," Morgan said, her voice getting stronger. "Everyone thinks she's a monster, but these symbols, they're not about destruction. They're about loneliness, about searching for something that doesn't exist anymore." Before Brooks could ask more questions, his communication device buzzed. Miller's voice came through with obvious worry. "Captain, you need to get back to the ship now. The energy readings are getting much stronger. Whatever is coming, it will be here soon." Brooks helped Morgan to her feet. She was weak from sitting at the computer for hours, without food or rest. As they walked toward the docking bay, she kept talking about the translation. "The symbols show a figure reaching across empty space," she said. "Not attacking, not destroying, just reaching out, looking for others like itself. But there are no others. It's alone." They reached the ship just as the sensors began showing massive energy spikes. Brooks ordered his crew to prepare for immediate departure, but something made him hesitate. The translation Morgan had been working on stayed in his mind. If the Voidwalker was really just searching for something, maybe running away was not the only option. "Captain, we need to leave now," said his first officer, Commander Amanda Cole. "The psychic pressure is starting to affect the crew." Brooks could feel it too. A strange weight in his mind, like someone pressing against his thoughts. But unlike his crew, who were showing signs of fear and confusion, Brooks found he could think clearly. The pressure was there, but it did not overwhelm him. "Sir, please," Cole said again. "We have to go." Brooks looked at the energy readings one more time. The Voidwalker would arrive in less than an hour. Every rule and regulation said they should run immediately. But something about those ancient symbols made him want to stay. Maybe for the first time in thousands of years, someone could try to understand instead of just running away. "Prepare for departure," he told his crew. "But do not engage engines yet. I want to see what happens when she gets here." Cole stared at him in shock. "Captain, that goes against every protocol we have." "I know," Brooks said quietly. "But maybe it's time someone broke protocol. The next hour would change everything." In the galaxy, Brooks did not know it yet, but his decision to stay would begin a friendship that would reshape how different species understood each other. Sometimes the most important choices are the ones that go against everything you have been taught to do. The space around the USS Endeavour began to change. Brooks watched his instruments go wild as energy readings spiked beyond anything his ship had ever detected. His crew gripped their stations as waves of psychic pressure washed over them. Some were crying. Others shook uncontrollably. A few had passed out at their posts. But Brooks felt different. The mental pressure was there, like a heavy blanket over his thoughts, but he could still think clearly. He could still make decisions. This puzzled him because every report said that humans were just as vulnerable as other species to the Voidwalker's psychic effects. "Captain," Commander Cole gasped, her face pale with terror. "We have to run. I can barely think straight." "Hold position," Brooks ordered. He turned to Dr. Morgan, who sat in a corner chair looking exhausted but alert. "Doctor, are you feeling the psychic pressure?" "Yes, but it's not as bad as before," she replied. "When I was alone on the station for days, it was much worse. Having you here seems to help somehow." Suddenly the view screen showed something impossible. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as a figure materialized in the space before their ship. She was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but also somehow appeared to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Her form shifted constantly between solid matter and pure energy. Sometimes she looked almost human, with long flowing hair and graceful limbs. Other times she appeared as geometric patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Her eyes, when Brooks could see them clearly, held a sadness so deep it seemed to contain the weight of entire civilizations. When she moved, space itself rippled around her like water. Then she spoke, but not with words. Her voice came directly into their minds, carrying emotions and images, along with meaning. Brooks felt her loneliness like a physical pain in his chest. 3,000 years of searching. 3,000 years of being alone, while every living thing ran from her in fear. Who dares to remain? Her voice echoed in their thoughts. Who stays when all others flee? Brooks stepped forward, fighting against the overwhelming sadness that threatened to crush his spirit. "I am Captain Ryan Brooks of the human ship Endeavour. We received a distress call and came to help." For a long moment, there was silence. Then Brooks felt something like surprise from the massive being before them. "Human," she said, and the word carried wonder. "You can hear me clearly." "You do. Not run screaming into the void." "We can hear you," Brooks confirmed, "and we're not running." The being's attention focused on him with an intensity that would have destroyed most minds. Brooks felt her probing his thoughts, not violently, but with careful curiosity. What she found seemed to amaze her. "I am called Zarathius, by those who know enough to name me," she said. "I am the last of the architects, the builders of galaxies, the shapers of early creation. My people transcended physical existence eons ago, leaving me behind to search for others worthy of joining them." Images flooded Brooks' mind. He saw ancient beings of incredible power working together to build the fundamental structures of the universe. He saw them gradually losing interest in physical reality as they evolved beyond the need for bodies or planets. He saw Zarathis, younger then and desperate to follow them, but denied transcendence because she still cared about the physical world they were abandoning. "They set me a task," Zarathis continued. "Find the nexus points they built throughout the galaxy. Prove that I have grown beyond attachment to lesser forms of life. Only then may I join them in the higher dimensions where they now exist." Brooks felt the crushing weight of her isolation. For 3 millennia, she had searched for these nexus points, but every inhabited world she approached emptied out in terror. She could not ask for help because her very presence drove other beings to madness. She could not make friends because her psychic emanations were too powerful for normal minds to handle. "But you," she said, focusing on Brooks again. "You and your companion, hear me without losing your sanity. How is this possible?" Brooks thought about it carefully. Humans had always been considered average in most ways compared to other galactic species. They were not as strong as the warrior races, not as intelligent as the scholar species, not as long-lived as the ancient civilizations, but they had survived a particularly violent evolution on a dangerous planet. Maybe that had given them something unique. "I think humans developed natural defenses against mental intrusion," he said. "We had to protect our minds from predators and from each other. Maybe that makes us resistant to psychic pressure." Dr. Morgan spoke up from her chair. "Captain, the translation I was working on. The symbols showed that the architect's definition of transcendence might be wrong. They thought becoming detached from physical reality was evolution, but maybe real growth comes from forming deeper connections, not abandoning them." Zarathis turned her attention to the doctor, and Morgan winced under the mental pressure, but did not collapse. "You read the old writings. You understand their meaning." "Some of it," Morgan said. "The symbols suggest that the architects were afraid of connection because it brought pain. But avoiding pain also means avoiding growth and joy and love." For the first time in 3,000 years, Zarathis felt something like hope. Here were beings who could speak with her, who could understand her situation without being destroyed by it. She had found what she never dared to dream existed, others who could bridge the gap between her cosmic consciousness and the smaller world of individual lives. But her excitement caused dangerous energy surges. Space-time began to warp around the ship as her emotions destabilized local reality. Brooks felt the hull of his ship groaning under forces it was never designed to handle. "You must control your power," he said urgently. "You're tearing space apart." Zarathis pulled back immediately, horrified that her joy might destroy the first real conversation she had experienced in millennia. The energy levels dropped back to merely dangerous instead of catastrophic. "This is why I remain alone," she said sadly. "Even when I find those who can speak with me, my very existence threatens them. Perhaps my people were right to leave me behind." "No," Brooks said firmly. "They were wrong. Connection is not weakness. We'll find a way to make this work." Neither of them knew how prophetic those words would prove to be. News of Captain Brooks' contact with the Voidwalker spread through human space faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Within days, every major government and military organization in human territory knew about the unprecedented encounter. The reactions were as divided as they were intense. Admiral Patricia Stone paced the floor of her office at Earth's Fleet Command, studying reports from the USS Endeavour with keen interest. She saw opportunity where others saw danger. If humans could communicate with the most feared entity in the galaxy, while other species could not, that gave humanity a unique advantage. She immediately began planning ways to use this discovery for strategic purposes. Think about it, she told her staff during an emergency meeting. Every other species runs in terror from this thing, but we can talk to it. We can potentially direct it toward our enemies while staying safe ourselves. This could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Dr. Helen Carter, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, strongly disagreed. She had spent years studying how different species thought and felt. From her office at the Xenological Institute, she sent urgent messages to every human leader she could reach. "This being is not a weapon," she wrote. "The reports make it clear that Zarathus is suffering from profound isolation and loneliness. Using her pain for military advantage would be not only morally wrong, but strategically foolish. If we prove that we are just like every other species that has disappointed her, we will lose the only chance in 3,000 years to help her find peace." Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what they saw as a catastrophic threat to galactic stability. Ambassador Kethfer of the Altarian Republic stood before the assembly, his blue skin flushed darker with anger. "The humans have violated the most basic principle of galactic safety," he declared. "No species has the right to communicate with a Class Omega entity. Their reckless actions could destabilize the entire economic and political structure of civilized space. The Voidwalker has already begun moving more aggressively," added Counselor Vexai of the Merchant Alliance. 3 systems have reported evacuation orders in the past week alone. The economic damage from these disruptions is already reaching billions of credits. The council chamber buzzed with worried conversations in dozens of languages. Species that rarely agreed on anything found themselves united in their fear and anger toward humanity's actions. They demanded immediate sanctions against human space and a complete ban on any further contact with Zarathus. Back on the USS Endeavor, Brooks found himself stripped of his command and confined to quarters pending a formal investigation. But he was not idle. Dr. Carter had arranged for secure communications that allowed him to continue working with her research team. Together, they began developing new protocols for communicating with Zarathus safely. Dr. Morgan, recovered from her ordeal, but still affected by her extended exposure to psychic pressure, provided crucial insights from her translation work. "The nexus points are not just markers," she explained during one of their secret meetings. "They are actual doorways to the dimension where the architects exist, but they require massive amounts of psychic energy to activate, energy that only Zarathus possesses," Brooks realized. "That's why she needs to find them all. She's trying to power up a dimensional gateway that will let her join her people." Dr. Carter pulled up star charts showing the known locations of the nexus points. "The problem is that every single one is located in an inhabited system. When she approaches to activate them, entire civilizations have to evacuate. The economic and social disruption is enormous." The situation was getting worse by the day. Zarathus, encouraged by her brief contact with humans, had begun moving more purposefully toward the nexus points. Her renewed hope made her less careful about the effect her presence had on inhabited worlds. What had once been a slow, wandering search became an urgent quest that left chaos in its wake. The Galactic Council responded by mobilizing military forces. They could not attack Zarathus directly, as their weapons were useless against a being that existed partially outside normal space-time. But they could intercept human ships and prevent any further contact that might encourage her dangerous behavior. Admiral Stone, despite her disagreement with Dr. Carter's approach, secretly supported Brooks' efforts. She provided him with a modified research vessel and a small crew of volunteers. "I still think this being could be useful to us," she told him during a clandestine meeting. "But even if you're right about helping her, the alternatives are worse. Either we find a solution, or we end up at war with the entire galaxy. Brooks assembled his team carefully. Dr. Carter joined him to provide psychological expertise. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a tactical specialist who had served with Brooks for years, volunteered, despite the obvious dangers. Dr. Susan Hayes, an expert in ancient alien technology, brought her knowledge of Nexus Point construction and operation as they prepared for their secret mission. Reports came in of increasing tensions throughout the galaxy. The Hegemony Coalition, a military alliance of aggressive species, had begun, making threats against any human vessel found in contested space. The Galactic Council had voted to impose economic sanctions on human trade routes. Several species had recalled their ambassadors from human worlds. "We're running out of time," Dr. Carter warned Brooks. "Every day Zarathis continues her search. The galaxy becomes more united against us. If we're going to act, it has to be soon." Brooks studied the star charts one more time. Zarathis was heading for the Cygnus Nexus Point, located in a system inhabited by 3 different species. Her arrival would force millions of beings to abandon their homes, at least temporarily. The economic and social costs would be staggering. "If we can reach her before she gets to Cygnus, maybe we can convince her to try a different approach," he said. "But it means going through space controlled by hostile alien fleets." Lieutenant Morrison checked his weapon systems. "The ship has defensive capabilities, but against an entire fleet, we would not last long." Dr. Hayes looked up from her technical readouts. "There might be another way. If we can understand how the Nexus Points work, maybe we can find an alternative that doesn't require her to visit inhabited systems." Brooks made his decision. "We launch in 12 hours. Whatever happens, we have to try. Zarathis has been alone for 3,000 years. If humanity can help her find peace, we have an obligation to do it." As his small ship prepared to depart on its dangerous mission, Brooks wondered if they were making the right choice. The fate of galactic civilization might depend on whether one lonely being could learn to trust again, and whether humanity could prove worthy of that trust. The modified research vessel Independence slipped through space toward the Cygnus system, its crew knowing that dozens of alien warships were hunting for them. Brooks had named the ship after the principle he hoped to defend, the right of different species to make their own choices about contact and friendship. 3 Hegemony destroyers just passed through the Kepler Junction, reported Lieutenant Morrison from his tactical station. "They're spreading out in a search pattern. Looks like they know we're coming." Dr. Carter monitored the ship's psychic shielding systems, experimental technology designed to protect human minds from extended exposure to Zarathis's mental emanations. "The shields are working, but I don't know how long they'll hold under full psychic pressure," she said. "We've never tested them under real conditions." Dr. Hayes worked frantically at her science station, studying data about Nexus Point technology that she had gathered from ancient ruins across the galaxy. "I think I understand how they work," she announced. "They're not just doorways, they're tests. Each one requires the user to demonstrate a different kind of transcendence." "What kind of tests?" Brooks asked, carefully piloting the ship through an asteroid field to avoid detection. "The first Nexus Point tests the ability to release attachment. 2 physical possessions," Hayes explained. "The second tests freedom from emotional bonds. The third requires abandoning the need for purpose or meaning. Each one demands that the user give up another aspect of normal existence." Brooks felt a chill of understanding. They designed the tests to prove that someone was ready to abandon everything that makes life worth living. No wonder Zarathia has been getting more desperate. The closer she gets to completing them, the more isolated she becomes. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Morrison. "Captain, we have company." 2 Altarian cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace, directly ahead of us. The alien ships immediately began broadcasting surrender demands in multiple languages. When Brooks ignored them and changed course, they opened fire with weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. Energy beams crackled around the Independence as Brooks pushed the engines to maximum power. "They want to capture us alive," Morrison observed, returning fire with their defensive systems. "Probably to put us on trial for endangering galactic security." Brooks threw the ship into a steep dive toward the nearest planet, using its gravity well to increase their speed. The Altarian ships followed, their larger size making them less maneuverable, but better armed. The chase continued for several tense hours as both sides played a deadly game of cat and mouse among the system's moons and space debris. They finally escaped by hiding in the exhaust trail of a massive cargo hauler. But the delay cost them precious time. When they reached the rendezvous coordinates where they expected to find Zarathis, she was already gone, heading directly for the Cygnus Nexus point. "We're too late," Dr. Carter said, checking her instruments. "The psychic readings show she passed through here hours ago. She's almost at Cygnus now." Brooks ordered maximum speed toward the Cygnus system, knowing they were probably heading into a trap. The Galactic Council would have anticipated this move and concentrated their forces around the inhabited worlds that Zarathis was approaching. When they arrived, the sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrifying. Zarathis hung in space near the Cygnus Nexus point, a massive crystalline structure that the ancient architects had built on the edge of the system billions of years ago. Her form was more stable than before, as if proximity to the Nexus point gave her greater control over her existence, but her presence had indeed caused exactly the chaos that everyone feared. 3 different species had been forced to evacuate their homeworlds, leaving behind cities and infrastructure that represented centuries of civilization. Millions of refugees crowded into hastily prepared emergency shelters on distant moons and space stations. "The economic damage must be in the trillions," Morrison observed grimly. "Even if they can return to their homes tomorrow, the disruption will take years to repair." Zarathis noticed their approach immediately. "You came," her mental voice carried surprise and gratitude. "I did not think I would see you again." "We promised we would find a way to help you," Brooks replied, opening communications with her. "But we need to talk before you activate the Nexus point." Dr. Hayes had been studying the ancient structure with her instruments. "Zarathis, can you tell us exactly what happens when you activate a Nexus point?" "I must demonstrate that I have transcended attachment to the physical realm," she replied. "Each test requires me to prove my growth beyond the need for material existence, emotional connections, and individual purpose." Dr. Carter spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "But that's not transcendence. That's just another kind of death. Real growth means learning to connect more deeply, not less." Images flowed from Zarathis's mind, showing her memories of the other Nexus points she had already activated. Each test had required her to give up something precious. At the first point, she had released her attachment to the physical artifacts of her people. At the second, she had forced herself to stop caring about the civilizations that fled from her approach. Each sacrifice had made her more powerful, but also more alone. "I have only 2 more tests to complete," she said. "Then I can join my people in the higher dimensions and end this eternal isolation." "What if there's another way?" Brooks asked. "What if instead of abandoning connection, you chose to embrace it despite the difficulties?" Before Zarathis could respond, space around them lit up with the arrival of the Galactic Council's combined fleet. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species surrounded the area, their weapons trained on both the Independence and Zarathis herself. "Admiral Vorthak, of the Hegemony." Coalition's voice crackled over the communication channels. "Human vessel, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. Any attempt to assist the Voidwalker in activating the Nexus point will be considered an act of war against all civilized species." Brooks found himself caught between 2 impossible choices. If he helped Zarathis complete her tests, she might find peace, but only by becoming even more isolated than before. If he opposed her, she would remain trapped in her current existence of endless searching and loneliness. There has to be a third option, he muttered, studying the tactical display that showed the alien fleet closing in. Dr. Hayes suddenly looked up from her readings with excitement. Captain, I found something in the Nexus Point's programming. There's a hidden option that the architects never told her about. The tests can be reversed. What do you mean? Zarathius asked, her attention focused intently on the scientist. Instead of proving you can abandon connection, you can choose to prove the value of connection by accepting its limitations, Hayes explained. But it means giving up your cosmic power in exchange for the ability to exist among other beings without harming them. The choice that would determine the fate of the galaxy now lay before them. Zarathis could complete her original quest and transcend to join her people. Or she could choose a different kind of transcendence, one that led toward connection rather than away from it. But either choice would have to be made quickly, as Admiral Vorthak's fleet was preparing to attack. The moment of decision had arrived. Zarathius floated in space between the crystalline Nexus Point and the massive alien fleet, her cosmic form rippling with uncertainty. Brooks could feel her mental struggle as she weighed 3,000 years of searching against the possibility of something entirely different. You ask me to give up everything I have worked toward, she said, her psychic voice carrying ancient pain. My people, my purpose, my very reason for existing. Dr. Carter leaned forward at her station. We're asking you to choose a different purpose. Instead of joining those who abandoned the physical universe, you could help bridge the gap between different forms of existence. Admiral Vorthak's patience ran out. His fleet began moving into attack formation, weapons charging with deadly energy. Human vessel, you have 30 seconds to withdraw, or we will consider you enemy combatants. Brooks made a desperate choice. Instead of retreating or fighting, he did something that no military manual had ever recommended. He opened a direct communication channel to the entire Galactic Council fleet. Admiral, I know you see Zarathis as a threat, he said, his voice carrying across space to hundreds of ships. But she's not a weapon or a natural disaster. She's a person who has been alone for longer than most of your civilizations have existed. We have a chance to help her find peace without completing those destructive tests. The human speaks truth, Zarathis added, her mental voice reaching every ship in the fleet simultaneously. For the first time in millennia, she deliberately made her communication gentle enough that other species could hear her without being overwhelmed. I have caused you fear and disruption because I knew no other way to exist, but perhaps there is another path. Some of the alien captains hesitated, but Admiral Vorthak remained unmoved. Your words change nothing. The damage has already been done. Millions of beings have been displaced because of your presence. The economic chaos will take decades to repair. Dr. Hayes suddenly called out from her science station. Captain, I've found something important in the Nexus Points database. The architects didn't just build these as tests. They built them as prison locks. Everyone's attention focused on her as she explained her discovery. The architects weren't trying to transcend to a higher dimension. They were trying to escape from something they had created. Zarathis isn't the last of her people because they evolved beyond physical existence. She's the last because they destroyed themselves trying to run away from the consequences of their actions. Images flowed from the Nexus Point's ancient memory banks, showing the true history of the architects. They had indeed shaped the early universe, but their cosmic engineering had created problems they couldn't solve. Instead of facing those problems, they had tried to transcend them by abandoning physical reality entirely. The tests were designed to ensure that anyone following them would make the same choice to run away, rather than stay and fix what was broken. They left me behind not because I was unworthy, Zarathis realized, her mental voice heavy with new understanding. They left me behind because I was the only one willing to stay and try to repair what we had damaged. The revelation changed everything. Brooks seized the moment to make his proposal to both Zarathis and the alien fleet. What if instead of transcending or running away, we work together to fix the problems? Zarathus has the power and knowledge. Humanity can serve as intermediaries because we can communicate with her safely. The other species have the numbers and resources to implement solutions on a galactic scale. Admiral Vorthak scoffed at the suggestion. Impossible. The psychic emanations alone make cooperation unthinkable. Dr. Hayes smiled as she worked at her station. Actually, I think I can solve that problem. The nexus points don't just test transcendence. They can also modify psychic frequencies. If Zarathus is willing to accept limitations on her power, we can create a dampening field that allows normal interaction with other species. The choice before Zarathus became clear. She could complete the original tests and follow her people into exile from physical reality. She could remain as she was, forever isolated by her overwhelming presence, or she could accept voluntary limitations on her cosmic power in exchange for the chance to live among others and work toward repairing the damage her people had caused. Admiral Vorthak made his own choice, convinced that any compromise was too dangerous. He ordered his flagship to fire experimental quantum disruptor weapons designed to tear apart Zarathus's multidimensional existence. The attack succeeded in causing her immense pain but failed to destroy her. Instead, it triggered an emotional response that threatened to tear apart local spacetime. Brooks reacted with pure human instinct. He piloted the Independence directly between the attacking fleet and Zarathus, not with weapons or shields, but simply placing himself in harm's way to protect someone who was suffering. The gesture was small by cosmic standards, but its meaning resonated across dimensional barriers. "Stop," Zarathus called out, her pain-filled voice reaching every ship in the system. "This being risks his existence for mine, though I have brought him nothing but trouble. This is what the architects never understood. True transcendence comes not from abandoning others, but from choosing to help them despite the cost." She turned her attention to the nexus point and began the process of reversal that Dr. Hayes had discovered. Instead of proving her readiness to abandon physical existence, she chose to prove the value of connection by accepting its limitations. Power flowed from her cosmic form into the ancient crystalline structure, which began to glow with new purpose. The transformation was visible across the entire system. Zarathus's overwhelming psychic presence faded to manageable levels, while retaining enough of her original nature to remain truly herself. For the first time in 3,000 years, other beings could approach her without being driven to madness or terror. The first test came immediately. A young Altarian pilot, overwhelmed by curiosity, broke formation and flew his small fighter craft close to Zarathus. Instead of experiencing crushing psychic pressure, he found himself able to communicate normally with an ancient being who had shaped the very stars he navigated by. Admiral Vorthak found his fleet in disarray, as individual captains made their own choices about this unprecedented situation. Some maintained hostile positions, but others began approaching cautiously, drawn by scientific curiosity and the hope of understanding something that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Brooks docked his ship with the Nexus Point structure, which Zarathus had transformed into a communication and coordination center. Dr. Carter established the first formal, diplomatic protocols for interacting with cosmic-level entities. Dr. Hayes began studying ways to use architect technology to repair environmental damage across the galaxy. Lieutenant Morrison found himself training alien security forces in techniques for protecting beings of vastly different power levels. The Galactic Council faced a choice of their own. They could continue to treat Zarathus as a threat and humanity as dangerous intermediaries, or they could embrace this opportunity to solve problems that had seemed impossible before. The decision was not unanimous, but enough species chose cooperation to establish what became known as the Human Protocols. Brooks received a promotion to lead the new Xenological Contact Division, but more importantly, He had found a new purpose. Standing on the observation deck of their makeshift station, he watched ships from dozens of species dock peacefully nearby. Zarathus stood beside him in a form that appeared almost human, though her eyes still held the depth of cosmic experience. "Do you regret your choice?" he asked her. "Every day I discover new aspects of connection I never understood before," she replied. "The pain of caring about others is real, but so is the joy of sharing experiences and working toward common goals. My people were wrong to think that avoiding pain was the same as transcending it." Through the viewport, they could see repair ships beginning to restore the damaged worlds of the Cygnus system. The refugees were returning to their homes, but now they came back with new knowledge and new allies. The economic disruption was being transformed into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation between species. "What happens next?" Brooks wondered. Zarathus smiled, an expression that would have been impossible in her previous cosmic form. "Now we do what the architects should have done from the beginning. We fix what is broken, we help what is lost, and we prove that connection is stronger than isolation." The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had found its unique role as mediators and bridge builders, while Zarathus had discovered that true transcendence meant growing toward others, rather than away from them. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is refusing to turn away from someone else's pain, even when that someone could accidentally destroy star systems. But even more courageous is the choice to limit your own power in order to help others, proving that the strongest beings are those willing to make themselves vulnerable for the sake of connection.